Now I'm speaking as an old timer,
Yeah.
but at the time, I think directors were just supervisors.
A guy who could defuse a bomb with a paperclip and a piece of gum, turning everyday junk into life-saving gadgets, suddenly vanishes from the spotlight after saving the world week after week. Richard Dean Anderson, the face of MacGyver, hasn't just stepped back, he's built a fortress of silence around the one role that defined him, dodging interviews, skipping reunions, and letting rumors swirl like smoke from one of his improvised flares. At 74, with the world begging for just one more story from the duct tape wizard, why has he stayed so quiet? And now, whispers from his inner circle hint he's finally cracking the door open, ready to spill on the bruises, the betrayals, and the brilliant chaos that made MacGyver a legend. This isn't your average nostalgia trip. It's the raw, untold ride of a man who fixed everything on screen, but couldn't patch up the toll it took off it. Stick around, because what he's about to reveal might just rewire how you see that mullet and that smile forever. Long before anyone handed him a Swiss Army knife and called him a hero, Richard Dean Anderson was just a skinny kid from Minneapolis with one dream: to lace up and hit the ice as a professional hockey player. He lived for it, skating every spare second, even breaking both arms at different times because crashing into the boards was just part of the deal. Music was another obsession. He played guitar, idolized Jimi Hendrix, and even busked on street corners. But hockey felt like destiny. Then, in his early 20s, a brutal collision shattered his elbow so badly that surgeons told him the pro leagues were over. Just like that, the dream cracked apart. Lost and directionless, he hitchhiked across the country, slept on beaches in California, worked odd jobs from bicycle repairman to street mime, and even spent time as a jester at a Renaissance fair. Yes, tights and all. Friends say those wandering years were when he learned to improvise with whatever life threw at him, the exact mindset that would later make MacGyver feel so real. Eventually, he landed in Los Angeles, took acting classes on a whim, and started booking tiny roles. A few lines on soap operas, a quick death scene here and there. He was broke enough that he once lived in a garage and showered at the gym. Nobody in Hollywood saw a future leading man. They saw a tall, charming guy who could deliver a line and disappear. But that garage-dwelling dreamer was quietly building the grit that would carry him straight into television history when the right script finally landed on his doorstep. But one role would rewrite everything, and it came with a demand so wild most actors laughed it off. In 1985, ABC was desperate for something fresh, and a producer named Henry Winkler, yes, the Fonz himself, had this crazy idea: a secret agent who hated guns and solved everything with science and a pocket knife. They auditioned dozens of tough guy types, but the network kept saying no. Then, Richard Dean Anderson walked in wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, looking like he'd just come from fixing someone's carburetor. He read 2 lines, cracked a joke about how he could turn the casting couch into a catapult if they needed a quick escape, and the room went silent in the best way. Winkler later said it was the fastest yes of his career. What sealed it wasn't just the charm, it was Anderson's personal rule that lined up perfectly with the character. He had grown up watching Vietnam on television and hated how casually shows treated violence. When the producers asked if he'd be okay never firing a gun on screen, he didn't hesitate. "That's the only way I'll do it." They shook hands, and just like that, Angus MacGyver was born. Overnight, Anderson went from sleeping in his car between auditions to carrying an entire primetime series on his shoulders. The mullet became iconic, the leather jacket became legend, and phrases like MacGyver it started slipping into everyday conversation. Ratings exploded. Kids started raiding their parents' toolboxes instead of toy guns. Even the NRA sent angry letters because a hero who refused to shoot was somehow beating every bad guy in sight. Fame came fast, but so did the cracks nobody saw coming. Being MacGyver looked effortless on television, but behind the camera, it was 7 seasons of pure punishment. Richard Dean Anderson insisted on doing almost every stunt himself, because in his words, the audience can smell a double. That meant climbing real buildings, swinging from actual ropes, and setting off controlled explosions, sometimes only a few feet away. The crew kept a running joke that the prop guy's most important job was keeping an endless supply of ice packs ready. The injuries piled up fast. He tore ligaments leaping between rooftops, cracked ribs when a harness snapped, and once compressed a disc in his lower back so badly that he spent an entire weekend in the hospital between shoots. Doctors told him to rest for 6 weeks. He was back on set in 4 days, limping through scenes and hiding the pain behind that trademark grin. Years later, he admitted the worst part wasn't the falls, it was the constant little cuts and burns from building the gadgets live on camera. One explosion went slightly wrong and sent a piece of metal into his thigh. They slapped makeup on it and kept rolling. By season 5, he was in almost every single frame of every episode, sometimes 42 minutes of screen time in a 44-minute show. He barely slept, lived on coffee and adrenaline, and started wearing a back brace under the leather jacket just to stay upright. Crew members remember him quietly vomiting from pain in his trailer, then walking out smiling like nothing happened. The man who could fix anything on screen was slowly breaking in real life, and nobody outside the tight inner circle had a clue. The hero's smarts couldn't fix what was brewing off-screen, and by the final seasons, even Anderson knew something had to give. By the time season 7 rolled around in 1992, Richard Dean Anderson wasn't just tired. He was running on fumes nobody could see. He was 39 when the show started, 42 by the end, and every year had carved deeper lines under those famous eyes. Producers begged for an 8th season. The ratings were still strong, but Anderson sat them down and said the words nobody expected. "I'm done." Not angry, not dramatic, just done. He later explained it was never about money or ego. It was about life. Being in every scene meant 0 time for anything else. No real vacations, no steady relationships, no chance to just breathe. Friends noticed he had started talking about wanting a family, wanting mornings where he wasn't memorizing how to defuse a bomb with a hockey puck and dental floss before sunrise. When the network offered a reduced episode order, he turned it down flat. MacGyver deserves someone who can give him everything, he told them, and I don't have anything left to give. 2 made-for-television movies wrapped the story in 1994, but even those were shot with Anderson moving like a man twice his age. After the final wrap party, he packed a tent, drove north, and disappeared into the Canadian wilderness for weeks. No publicist, no interviews, just silence. When he came back, Hollywood assumed he'd chase the next big action franchise. Instead, he took small guest spots, turned down gun-toting roles by the dozen, and quietly started auditioning for something softer. A sci-fi show about opening a gate to other worlds. Stargate SG-1 would give him 10 more years in front of the camera, but on his terms, fewer stunts, more humor, and a cast that felt like family. Years later, a new threat to everything he built emerged, and this time, it wore the same name as his greatest creation. In 2016, 24 years after the original went off the air, CBS announced a MacGyver reboot. Fans lost their minds with excitement, until the first trailer dropped. Gone was the lone wolf who hated guns, replaced by a 20-something hotshot surrounded by a full team, high-tech toys, and yes, plenty of gunfire. Richard Dean Anderson watched that trailer exactly once. His reaction, according to people in the room, was a single quiet sentence. "That's not MacGyver." Producers flew to his house with the red carpet treatment, private jet, Big check, the offer of an executive producer title and a cameo as an older, wiser version of the character. They promised he could steer the ship back toward the nonviolent roots. Anderson listened politely, asked a few questions, then turned them down flat. No anger, no public trash talk, just a firm no. When pressed later at a rare convention appearance, he chose his words carefully. My first impression wasn't very positive. I wished them well, but I couldn't put my name on it. Translation, it hurt. The new show ran 5 seasons anyway, and the internet split into camps. One side called the original dated, the other side accused CBS of stripping the soul out of a legend. Behind the scenes, Anderson never badmouthed the young cast. He even sent Lucas Till a congratulatory note, but he refused every invitation to cross over. Friends say the snub wasn't pride, it was protection. MacGyver had been his promise to a generation that you could be tough without pulling a trigger. Watching that promise get rewritten felt personal. As Hollywood kept trying to cash in on his legacy, darker shadows started circling the man himself, shadows that had nothing to do with bad scripts. By the time Richard Dean Anderson stepped away from regular acting after Stargate ended in 2007, the internet had changed everything. Suddenly fans could reach their heroes with a click, and predators saw dollar signs. Starting around 2015, fake Richard Dean Anderson profiles exploded across Facebook, Instagram knockoffs, and sketchy dating sites. The script was always the same. A lonely widow or single mom would get a friend request from the real RDA, complete with stolen convention photos. Within weeks, the scammer would be crying about a sick grandchild or a lost wallet and begging for $5,000 wired to Ghana. Anderson's official website turned into a weekly warning board. Almost every update for the last decade has included a blunt headline: "I am not on Facebook. I will never ask you for money. Anyone who does is a criminal." Fans still fell for it. Some lost their life savings. One woman flew to Los Angeles with her kids because Richard promised to marry her at Disneyland. The heartbreak got so bad that Anderson stopped doing private meet and greets at conventions. He couldn't stomach another tearful story. Then came the death hoaxes. Every couple of years, a viral post claims he's gone. Car crash, heart attack, quiet passing at home. In November 2025, it happened again. Grainy photo, fake news link, millions of shares before breakfast. His daughter Wiley had to jump on a friend's account just to say, "Dad's fine, he's literally eating pancakes right now." The hoaxes hurt more than people realize. Anderson has said the worst part is watching fans grieve someone who's still alive, then feeling guilty for not being out there enough to stop the rumors. He tried Twitter once, years ago, lasted a few months, then deleted everything because the impersonators drowned out the real voice. Ever since, silence has been his shield. No verified social media, no red carpet selfies, just the occasional post on his own website, written in his own laid-back style. To some, it looks like he vanished. To him, it feels like survival. Through it all, one milestone crept closer, a quiet countdown that even 75 years couldn't dim. September 29th, 2025, marked exactly 40 years since MacGyver first stepped onto television screens and told the world you didn't need a gun to be a hero. Conventions that weekend turned into love letters, fans dressed as Phoenix Foundation agents, teenagers who weren't alive for the original series holding signs that read, "You taught me how to think," grown men crying while handing over childhood Swiss Army knives for Richard Dean Anderson to sign. He showed up to several of those events himself, moving slower than he used to, leaning on a cane sometimes, but still flashing that same crooked grin that once got him out of fictional nuclear meltdowns. Between photo ops, he sat on panels and finally started opening up, not in screaming headlines, but in small human moments. He told a packed room in London how the back injury from season 3 still wakes him up some nights. He admitted the reboot decision kept him awake more than once because he worried he had let fans down by staying quiet. Then, almost casually, he dropped the line everyone in the audience felt in their bones. "I've got stories I've never told anybody. Maybe it's time." Since that weekend, his official website has been teasing something. Short posts, nothing flashy. "Working on putting 40 years into words. Bear with me." Another one, posted just last month, read, "Some memories hurt. Some make me laugh out loud. All of them are mine to give if you still want them." No announcement, no magazine cover, no podcast tour, just the quiet hum of a man deciding the fortress door doesn't have to stay locked forever. He turned 75 in January 2025, spent the day skiing, gentle slopes, with his daughter Wiley and a handful of old Stargate friends. Someone snapped a photo from behind. Silver hair, red jacket, standing at the top of a run like he's still 25 and ready to outsmart gravity itself. That picture ended up on his site with one caption in his own words, "Not done yet." So what does it all mean for the man who fixed the world with paperclips and hope? 40 years later, Richard Dean Anderson is still the only person on Earth who knows exactly what it felt like to carry an entire generation's belief that brains could beat bullets, to smile through a torn-up back, to walk away at the peak just so he could live long enough to watch his daughter grow up, and to guard that legacy so fiercely that he let the world think he disappeared rather than let imposters sell pieces of it. He never chased the spotlight again, never cashed in with a tell-all book or a reality show, never turned MacGyver into a gun-toting cartoon for a quick paycheck. Instead, he chose quiet mornings, real friendships, and the kind of life where nobody asks him to defuse anything more dangerous than a stubborn jar of pickles. And now, at 75, with the 40th anniversary still echoing and those gentle website promises hanging in the air, he's finally loosening the knot. Not with fireworks, not with a Netflix special, but the way MacGyver would. One small, perfectly chosen tool at a time, handed directly to the people who never stopped believing in him. So keep an eye on that little website. When the next update drops, whenever he's ready, it won't be a press release or a publicity stunt. It'll just be Richard, sitting at his kitchen table like he's talking to an old friend, finally telling the stories he carried alone for 4 decades. If you loved hearing the real story behind the mullet and the Swiss Army knife, smash that like button so we can keep digging up these retro celeb secrets. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week Retro Celeb Talk brings you the untold stories Hollywood tried to bury. Drop your favorite MacGyver moment or your wildest Richard Dean Anderson memory in the comments right now. We read every single one, and who knows, someone very close to RDA might be scrolling too. Want more legends like this? Click the video on screen next, and let's dive into another icon who's finally ready to talk. See you in the next one.